各位觀眾，大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。總理杜魯多喺去年嘅9月出席印度20國集團峰會期間，向印度總理莫迪提出就卑詩省錫克教領袖尼賈爾被殺一案表示關注。咁其後，杜魯多喺國會下議院秋季復會嘅時候就表示，尼賈爾被殺案件同印度政府有關聯。咁之後兩國嘅關係轉趨緊張，雙方互逐外交官，聯邦貿易部長更加係取消貿易團代表前往印度，引發商界就擔憂兩國之間嘅貿易會否出現影響。印度一直都係本國10大貿易夥伴之一嚟㗎，兩國關係會點樣影響到雙方嘅經濟貿易呢？經濟上又會令到雙方有啲乜嘢損失呢？
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada is a rule of law country. The protection of our citizens and defense of our sovereignty are fundamental.
Right now, the focus for Canada is to let the work of the investigation proceed, and that's really important because, and you've heard me and the government talk about how important it is that that investigation happens, given that we had a Canadian, Canadian killed on Canadian soil.
印度作為本國10大貿易夥伴之一，關係轉趨緊張嘅局面係咪唔能夠挽回呢？
Different people have different opinions. We cannot help that, but at the moment, if you look around and see, there's so much of problems going on in Ukraine, in Israel, Palestine. So many international issues and problems. What is our problem? Comparatively, it is nothing.
喺舊年6月，錫克教領袖尼賈爾喺卑詩省素里市嘅一間錫克教寺廟嘅停車場，俾人槍擊，當場證實死亡。佢生前係屬於錫克教獨立組織嘅社運人士，並且因為曾經佢嘅立場而遭到威脅。喺2016年更加遭到印度政府以極端主義嘅相關罪名而尋求引渡。聯合兇案調查組隨即鎖定2名蒙面疑犯。原本一宗有目標嘅兇殺案，結果就引發兩國之間嘅關係轉差。
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada is a rule of law country. The protection of our citizens and defense of our sovereignty are fundamental. Our top priorities have therefore been, 1, that our law enforcement and security agencies ensure the continued safety of all Canadians, and 2, that all steps be taken to hold perpetrators of this murder to account. Canada has declared its deep concerns to the top intelligence and security officials of the Indian government. Last week at the G20, I brought them personally and directly to Prime Minister Modi in no uncertain terms.
總理杜魯多喺舊年9月國會下議院秋季復會之後嘅第一個會議，單方面指責卑詩省錫克教領袖被殺一案同印度政府有關聯。
In the strongest possible terms, I continue to urge the government of India to cooperate with Canada to get to the bottom of this matter. I also expect it to reiterate that its position on extrajudicial operations in another country is clearly and unequivocally in line with international law. I know many Canadians, particularly members of the Indo-Canadian community, are feeling angry or perhaps frightened right now. Let us not allow this to change us. Let us remain calm and steadfast in our commitment to our democratic principles and our adherence to the rule of law. This is who we are and what we do as Canadians.
喺國會下議院質詢時段，聯邦保守黨黨領博勵治亦都齊聲譴責任何喺本國領土上進行非法行為嘅人，期望當局盡快揾出真相。
Canadians deserve to be protected on Canadian soil. We call on the Indian government to act with utmost transparency as authorities investigate this murder, because the truth must come out. We must know who performed the assassination and who was behind the assassination. Conservatives will continue to work to get these answers. All Canadians now stand with diaspora communities of Indian origin. And it is now in this time that the official opposition makes an appeal for calm. We are all Canadians. This is our country. We must be united for our home and for each other. Let us all lock arms and join hands in condemning this murder, standing with the family and friends of its victim. Let us all put aside our differences to stand up for the rule of law. One law for all of our people, a law made in this chamber by Canadians for Canadians.
尼賈爾被殺嘅案件轟動全國。同日，外長喬美蘭宣布驅逐印度一名外交官，兩國關係隨即陷入低谷。印度亦都作出反制措施，驅逐本國41名外交官。而當時正準備同印度進行貿易協商嘅聯邦貿易部長伍鳳儀，隨即宣布擱置行程。
Right now, the focus for Canada is to let the work of the investigation proceed, and that's really important because and you've heard me and the government talk about how important it is that that investigation happens, given that we had a Canadian killed on Canadian soil. So we'll let that happen. I've said to Canadian businesses that it's that while they are continuing to do business in India, and my job as the trade minister is to make sure that the supports and the tools that are there to support Canadian businesses and investors in India continue to be available to them. So that's what we're doing for now. What I said was that that our focus is, of course, on this investigation. That work has to take place. And for Canadian businesses, what I've said to them, just to reassure them, because they expect that of their governments, that the tools that are available to them as they continue to do business and to invest and to make investments or to attract investment, that the services of the Canadian government continue to be there for them.
聯邦國際貿易部長伍鳳儀強硬回應，亦都令商界部分人士感到憂慮。商界人士主要憂慮兩國貿易唔明朗嘅前景，同埋有可能出現停擺狀態。不過有喺兩國進行貿易多年嘅商界代表就唔擔心呢個情況，佢更加派定心丸俾其他商界人士。
BC India Business Network, it was founded about 8 years ago, and the main purpose and the objective of this particular council or association was to enhance and develop trade, economy, commerce, as well as cultural items between India and Canada or India and BC. That was the main intention, and to get the people together, to get the businessmen together, and to develop the economies of both the countries. India and Canada have been friends since several years. It's been a very good partnership, and I don't think there's going to be any problem in future as we foresee. In every relationship, there are always a few hiccups here and there, and we consider this to be a minor hiccup, and it's a matter of a little more time when things will settle down and come back to normal.
卑詩省印度商業網絡創辦人 Fairchild 佢認為有商界人士擔心前景亦都係好正常。佢相信談判將會返回正常軌道，兩國關係亦都會隨之而得到改善。
Different people have different opinions. We cannot help that, but at the moment, if you look around and see, there's so much of problems going on in Ukraine, in Israel, Palestine, so many international issues and problems. What is our problem? Comparatively, it is nothing. So I don't see why anyone should worry. It's nothing to do with the business, or it's not that politically there's a cutoff in relations. No, there's no such thing. There's no, the diplomats are doing their work, they are working behind the scenes, and everything should be okay. I don't see any problem at all. Maybe temporarily a little bit of a hiccup for some time, but that's it, that's about all. There's going to be no loss of trade, no loss of business. Only what has been delayed is the free trade agreement which was being discussed. That had reached a very significant progress had been made. That may slow down a bit just because of loss of time. So once the negotiations start, and I'm sure the negotiations will start again very soon, and there should be no issue at all. We are fully confident because both countries have to lose and nobody wants to lose. This is just absolutely temporary. I'm positive that in a matter of a couple of months it will be restored, because as it is the free trade agreement, they have been talking since the last so many years and there has been no progress. The talks restarted, and Minister Mary Ng has done a fantastic job, and she has been in touch with her Indian counterpart on a very regular basis. Things had progressed to a great extent, and then suddenly there was a notification that due to review conditions, they wanted to review the trade, and therefore they were putting a temporary stop to the free trade agreement talks. That was how it was informed to us. But apparently then the truth came out, and the negotiations have been stopped only because of this political incident which took place. But as I said, this is just very temporary. It will start all over again, because both the countries want to start negotiating with each other, and that has been made amply clear by the prime ministers of both the countries.
Fairchild 佢又明確話，兩國長期建立伙伴關係非常重要，而兩國分別出口同埋進口嘅資源越嚟越多。
India depends very largely on fertilizers from Canada and fossil fuels. The major items of export from Canada to India are fossil fuels and fertilizers. Each fertilizer means there are so many products involved, potash and DAP and so many other things. And fossil fuels also is a wide range. There's so much of technology that goes from Canada to India. There are other raw material, minerals, copper, and a lot of, because we are very rich in natural resources. So we are exporting a lot of our resources, including lumber, paper pulp, huge quantities to India, and that is the bulk of the export from Canada to India. Similarly, from the Indian side also, there is a lot of import of pharmaceuticals, iron and steel, capital goods, electrical items, so many items, food, agriculture, vegetables, all kinds of things. So both have to depend on each other for trade. You cannot do one without the other. So I don't anticipate any problems of any kind. The trade will keep on increasing every year. The balance of trade is very narrow between Canada and India. We are almost importing and exporting almost the same amount in terms of value.
咁喺本國一啲印裔家人嘅商界代表認為家印關係轉差只係暫時嘅啫。某程度上，兩國本身嘅貿易關係強勁，貿易範疇亦都廣大，咁相信唔會因為個別嘅事件影響到兩國長久以嚟建立嘅關係。不過事實上，亦都有評論認為，兩國喺現時嘅關係變得緊張，實屬係最壞嘅時機。我哋下一節翻嚟再睇。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。根據本國聯邦政府嘅數字就顯示加拿大同印度兩國之間喺2022年嘅貿易金額達到120億，咁相比起2021年有57%嘅增長。不過，自從去年9月兩國嘅關係陷入低谷，有評論亦都擔心本國喺同中國嘅關係緊張之際，現時再加上同印度關係陷入僵局，將會令到本國嘅經濟帶嚟深遠嘅影響。
兩國驅逐外交官之後，事件繼續發酵。其中一個影響最大嘅層面就係兩國互相批出嘅各類簽證申請有嚴重滯後情況。根據加拿大移民部嘅估計，由於本國喺印度當地辦公嘅職員減少，今年2024年初就有17500份原本要處理嚟自印度嘅簽證申請積壓個案。有商界代表認為滯後情況可能會對勞動力造成影響。
But certainly, if we have difficulty in processing visas, it would affect that. But the visas for Indians to come to Canada are given by the Canadian government. So as long as the Canadian government continues to process visas, and as long as India doesn't impose travel restrictions on Indians to come to Canada, that should not be a factor. But the issue that's going to hurt us with labor from India are the conditions under which that labor is treated in Canada. So we have a large number of Indians that are recruited to come to colleges. So not the large four-year universities like U of T or UBC or University of Alberta, but that are recruited to come to colleges. And, those are middle-class Indians who scrape together the money for the college tuition. And well the problems we've had with international students at colleges, especially in Ontario, and I would argue British Columbia, a bit less here in Alberta. But, the use of those students for labor, the conditions, the false pretenses under which they are attracted to Canada, this is what's going to hurt immigration from India, not government political action. It's the actions of private sector actors in the for-profit education community and the businesses that rely on labor that are going to hurt Canadian immigration from India, and more so than I think any sort of political action.
加印兩國關係歷史悠長，但近期關係陷入低谷。唔少評論都認為呢一個係最壞期間發生最壞嘅事。Carol Dell 相信呢一種關係唔會維持得太耐。佢舉例中美關係雖然近年有交惡，但喺舊年年底中美領袖亦都展開咗會面。
If the time frame for Canada not wanting to engage is the current political dispute, then the answer is maybe. I would argue, but in the longer term, obviously the relationship will change. We've seen this with China and the US. President Xi is meeting with hundreds of US business leaders in San Francisco, something that we couldn't have imagined last summer when the US was shooting down spy balloons over the US. Yet, here we are a year later and the situation's changed. So this certainly won't be long term. In the near term, I think that the investments will continue, the business contacts will continue, they just can't be as public. A Canadian minister can't go with a delegation to talk about clean tech, but Canadian businesses certainly can go over to talk about clean tech. So what you've seen is the government, perhaps a high-level government stepping away, but the trade commissioners will continue to work on this. Government officials quietly will continue to work on this. So it's not a complete withdrawal. It's just, it doesn't look good for the minister to be doing this. But if the lower level functionaries continue to do it, no one's going to notice. And indeed, for a relationship that will last for decades in terms of clean tech, you can't throw everything out every time there's a speed bump in the relationship. You've got to maintain the ties. That's simply just the way business is done globally.
喺2025年，本國同印度政府簽署印太策略，去阻止中國同埋俄羅斯擴張。而喺較早之前，加中關係自中國華為副董事長孟晚舟喺溫哥華國際機場被捕，同埋兩名家人康明凱同埋斯帕弗被中國監禁之後，關係一直未見起色。而而家本國同印度又陷入僵局，早前簽訂嘅印太策略會唔會俾人感覺形同虛設呢
？No, that cannot happen. That has never happened. All throughout these years, ever since relations between Canada and India started, there was many years back just one incident where there was a thaw in relationship over the atomic reactor that was supplied to us, and that was used for making a bomb. Otherwise, the relations between Canada and India have been absolutely first class, no problem of any kind, and I don't see that kind of a problem. Any other problem taking place in future. This was a sad incident which took place due to a remark by the Prime Minister, but people understand. I think that's mature people will understand, and business will go on, politics will go on. Though you cannot mix the two together. Businessmen are businessmen. They are not bothered about what two politicians are talking about. They are worried about how to trade and how to make good money and see that the economy of both the countries flourish. That's the idea. So there won't be any such issues at all in future.
喺卑斯大學擔任政治科學學系教授嘅 Kurt Hubner 就認為各國長期落去都唔會出現僵持局面，而本國亦都正試圖同其他國家返回談判桌。
I wouldn't say it's a failure, but definitely, again, from a Canadian perspective, now Canada is now in a kind of two-war, put it this way, situation. There's this very deep-going conflict with China, and Canada is not the only country, but Canada was just very kind of putting a lot of cards on China years back. And with all the kind of disappointments, all this kind of trouble. So that's the one side. And now there's this other conflict coming along with India. So this partnership regarding how can we contain, so to say, the influence of China has definitely come with the most recent trouble under pressure. Again, those kind of agreements, I hope so, they would have a kind of longer shelf life. So, even though there's a trouble at the moment, I would actually, but this is my take, my reading on it, I would actually think we already see this very light signs of detente. Means they try to come back to the negotiation table. They will have more meetings. There's a lot of informal meetings going on. So I would think so that this strategy will survive, but maybe in a kind of, let us say, slightly modified way. We have to be aware that India has the strong support of the US. President Biden put a lot of emphasis on this relationship, and given sort of thing that Canada is a small player, so we can't afford to really also start a kind of conflict with the US in terms of allies. So I would expect that things are slightly improving.
作為商界人士，佢哋都普遍認為，即使加印雙邊關係有惡化，但影響有限，因為政府唔能夠阻止商界自由貿易。
I could be wrong. We could have an impact on trade. I'd be extremely surprised, but we should say that this isn't. I don't want anyone going out and putting money on the table that there won't be changes. But all factors considered, looking at past experience, looking at the evidence. The demand food security issues in India, the cutting of exports of food, really don't expect damage. As to what the Canadian government can do, not much. Governments don't trade. The private sector trades. So it's up to the private sector to make decisions based on private interest, return on investment, opportunity, risk. It's up to the private sector to determine where Canadian trade goes, not the government. The government can do things like hire more trade commissioners or sign a trade agreement, but those are marginal things. They really don't move trade. We've tried to diversify trade from the US for decades. And where are we nowadays? 2/3 of our trade is with the US, 70% of our exports, 82% of the exports from the prairies go to the US after decades of government efforts to diversify. The private sector makes a decision, not the government, and the private sector will make decisions based on risk, opportunity, and return. So there's not much that the government can do. That
countries are looking to India as an alternative source of supply from China. They want to develop India because India has the capacity and the capability and the technology and the brains to develop trade and supply and manufacture to other countries almost on parity with China. So if they don't want to deal with China, then the second choice is only India. So nobody can afford to spoil relations with India, Nor does India want to spoil relations with anybody. India wants to develop themselves. They want the economy to rise, to be, we have perhaps the third largest economy in the world today, and it's taken us a good amount of time to do so, to arrive at this position.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間就差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。咁如果觀眾咧想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得翻㗎啦。下星期同樣時間再同大家見面，晚安。